Hello lovely people, welcome back to my channel. It's Canisha. If you're new around here, my name is Canisha and I create content on career, lifestyle and just about everything in between. So if you like the sound of that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you some podcast recommendations because your girl listens to a lot of podcasts. So I figured why not share them with you in case there might be some gems in there that you like and want to listen to. The first group of podcasts I'm going to be talking about are some business/career podcasts that you should take a look at. The first is called Techish by Jessie and Michael. They are two millennials who are founders of different businesses and they basically give their perspective on tech news, business news and share their insights and thoughts. So if you're anyone that wants to know what's happening in the tech world and wants to keep their finger on the pulse, this is a good podcast to listen to, and it's not very long either. So definitely something that you can fit in less than half an hour and watch on your commute, or just wanting to find out more information without having to do all the searches on the internet. So yeah, I highly recommend this podcast because it's nice to hear the perspective and also stay tuned with what's happening in the tech and business world. The second podcast I recommend that's in this category is Diary of a CEO by Steven Bartlett. So I've been listening to this for the last, I'd say, year. And so I haven't watched his older episodes, but from when I started, I have been hooked. Steven Bartlett is a highly successful entrepreneur with multi-million-pound businesses. He's also a Dragons on Dragon's Den, and he just invites a whole host of different entrepreneurs, authors, sports stars, just a bunch of people who have done incredible things in their industries and spaces to talk about what their experience is as a leader, as a CEO, or someone at the top of their game. So if you want to hear refreshing interviews, conversations, and just something that gets you thinking about how could you be running your own business, or what are the lessons that you could be learning from these individuals, then this is a good podcast to listen to. He also does some summary episodes where basically they're like less than 10 minutes and it's some favourite moments from his favourite interviews. So if you want something more digestible and shorter to listen to, then he definitely supplies this. Now let's talk culture. This is probably the podcast category that I listen to so much. The first one is actually my most listened to podcast, and that is the Receipts podcast. It's hosted by three funny, intelligent women called Tolly, Milena and Audrey, and they are just, they're the best. They're basically like older sisters who talk candidly about life, love, lessons that they've learned, and just giving their perspective, because they also answer dilemmas about different issues and some trending topics that are happening at the time. So if you want to laugh, if you want to have some tears, if you want to feel like, wow, it's not just me experiencing this, then this podcast is the one for you. They recently released a book that is sort of almost like a tell-all book talking about different things that they're passionate about, also their own perspectives on life, and that's also just an extension of the incredible conversations that they have weekly on the Receipts podcast. So I highly recommend checking them out. You will literally just laugh all the time. Another podcast slightly similar to this is the 90s Baby Show. So this is hosted by three people, Ben Santana, Tammy Alchemy and 3P in the Cut. And I've been listening to them for quite a while now, and they're quite similar to the Receipts podcast, just in the sense where it's three friends talking about life, talking about their perspectives on things, trending topics, and it gives you a guy's perspective on a lot of different conversation. And they invite a whole host of friends, interesting people, artists, yeah, they're just cool people that you learn more about who they are through the show, and then you find them online and you follow them as well to listen more about their story. But I just think they have a humorous way of looking at life and really just bring different conversations out of each of their guests, and I think that's quite refreshing to listen to. It's on a slightly longer end in terms of like, sometimes the episodes are nearly 2 hours long, other times it's a lot less, so definitely something that you could either watch in one sitting or just break up over the course of the week. The thing that I'd rate honestly the most about the Receipts podcast and the 90s Baby Show is the consistency. Like, if you want to have a podcast show that you know is dropping every single week on the set day that they say, both of those hit it on the head. You can always expect on a Wednesday to listen to the Receipts podcast, Mondays to listen to the 90s Baby Show, and as a listener, that kind of consistency, I rate it so much. Highly recommend those two. The next podcast that I've sort of been listening to that's kind of like a culture one is Anything Goes by Emma Chamberlain. So Emma is a content creator that I have only just started watching in the last 3 months, and I have just been, yeah, I love her videos that she puts out on YouTube. I came across her podcast and it just feels like an extension of the things she talks about on YouTube. But Emma is a young woman in her 20s, highly successful, and she basically talks about her own perspectives on different things. So in the episodes that I listened to so far, she doesn't have guests, it's just her talking, but it really just feels like you listen to her friend speaking, and she just explores different topics that sort of come to mind, whether it's quality over quantity and other things that may not seem relatable because of like where she is within her career and her life in general. But you do find nuggets that sort of like, wow, actually I'm going to use this in my own life, or that's another perspective that I didn't think about before. The next podcast that I'm going to be talking about is Table Manners with Jessie Ware. So this is a podcast hosted by Jessie Ware and her mum Lennie, and they invite different guests to either go to their house, or during the pandemic they're sort of doing virtually, and they cook them a really nice meal, talk about the meal over the course of the podcast, but also interview their guests to find out what's going on for them, other opportunities, and just bond over this idea of like dinner table conversations and really being candid, vulnerable, but also finding the commonality, which is food, to really bring everyone together. So that's a really nice, refreshing listen, and something that's quite uniquely different from like other podcasts. Like they've got activities going on whilst they are talking as well. The next category that I'm going to be talking about is news. So anytime that I kind of want to listen to news or be updated on a certain thing that happens, there's two main places that I listen to. So the first is the Times News Briefing. So they release a podcast episode twice a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. They're literally less than 4 minutes long, and it's giving a rundown of all the latest headlines that are happening, and it's just a nice thing that I listen to whilst I'm brushing my teeth, because I get updated with what's going on in the world, whilst also knowing that there's going to be a second update in the afternoon that I can listen to, sort of see what the developments are. But it's the starting point for me to understand what's happening, and then obviously I can research further into that. And another similar one is the Journal. And this is a good one because they do daily episodes but are focused on different things. So it might be something that's going on in the news, they'll do like a deep dive into it, you can learn more about it, or they might be doing just a series of different topics and they dig deeper into that. So that's also another good news focused podcast to check out. Now my last category that I'm going to be talking about is women and empowerment. So this one is basically filled with podcasts by women, for women, and actually for anyone to want to listen to. And I just love them all to bits, really enjoy them. So the first podcast I'm going to be talking about is To My Sisters by Renee and Courtney. So like the title says, To My Sisters, this is two podcasters called Renee and Courtney who are basically our online big sisters. So they talk about all different things from career, finances, love, friendship, tax, like everything, being an entrepreneur. They talk about it all, they answer dilemmas, and they give their own perspectives to situations and to topics in a way that's like, wow, I didn't think of it this way, or that is good to learn so I don't have to make the same mistakes. So I find them a really refreshing pair to listen to, because you can really, like, they are friends in real life, they're obviously friends on this podcast, but you can see this chemistry through how they talk to each other, what they talk about, and it's really inspiring. Both of them are of faith, so they, you know, talk about God and how God has an influence on all these things that we're doing, and that's also quite refreshing to listen to on a podcast, because, you know, faith is not always at the forefront of what people discuss. So I thought that was a really nice thing that they do on a regular. So yeah, so highly recommend To My Sisters. The last podcast that I talk about in the women empowerment category is Balanced Black Girl. So this is a podcast all about self-care, personal development, therapy, healing, basically just different topics that as a listener you get to understand a bit more about these topics, apply to your own life, and just take away key learnings. So if you're looking for something that's all about bettering your life, bettering what you're doing, and being a better version of yourself, then there's a lot to be learned in Balanced Black Girl. So I'd highly recommend checking them out too. So yeah, so that's my whistle tour stop on all the different podcasts that you need to check out. There's a variety in different kind of like genres to look into, but I'm always keen to find new podcasts. So if you have a podcast that you listen to a lot, please comment the name down in the comments and I'll be sure to check them out. But this list is constantly changing, evolving as I discover more, or as I sort of find myself in a different part of my life that I've not listened to certain ones anymore. Then it's always a transitioning thing. So hopefully you've been able to discover some really awesome podcasts, and I will catch you in my next video.